Welcome back to the channel.
Today we're gonna go explore downtown Charleston.
Yeah, and see what we can find in this historic area. And if you like this kind of videos, make sure to subscribe to that channel.
Let's go.
Yeah, we're going to Poogans Smokehouse. Check out the menu. Poogans Smokehouse.
Jalapeno cheese fritters sound delicious. Smokehouse nacho, that sounds really good too.
Yeah.
We could try both if you want.
Start with jalapeno fritters, I believe.
Cheddar jalapeno fritters.
Jalapeno.
Jalapeno on a stick.
There's the half rack of ribs and
That's a big bowl of potato salad.
and then there's the salad. It looks pretty good. With pulled pork.
Yep.
Yum.
And ranch.
Alright, so what'd you think of the smokehouse?
It was interesting. Definitely not the best barbecue I've ever had, but it wasn't bad. I didn't really like my salad that much just because the lettuce was a little bit more bitter. I think if it was romaine lettuce, I definitely would have liked it a lot better. What did you think about your ribs?
Potato salad was good. Coleslaw was okay. The fritters were actually just jalapeno poppers, so
Yeah,
legit
so
tip there. The ribs were good. They were kind of small in the portion size, but they were tasty. They weren't bad. They were good. They weren't the best I've ever had, but definitely an interesting experience. So we're gonna go check out the rest of the French Quarter.
Yeah.
And we're not talking about New Orleans.
No, we're in Charleston, so we're gonna go explore.
Yeah, let's go
And
check
it's hot.
it out. I have to say, the one thing I find here is there's some really cool colored buildings, the old school ones. I'm just a little like fan at the top, so there's probably like some kind of bar up there. The Vindu. What do you think of the architecture here?
I like it. Like when we were driving in earlier and seeing all of that lady was being really weird. Seeing all of the really like old houses, I really like that. But yeah, so when we were driving through with all of the old houses, I was telling Gary, I was like, if I ever bought an old house, I would love to buy like the houses that have the architecture of like the old South with like 2 stories and the big wraparound porches. I think those houses are gorgeous. Like that's my favorite style of old house. So I do really appreciate like the Southern architecture here, but it does have a really sad history to it too. So it's kind of like,
So if you have Southern architecture, a Maserati, and a boat,
I would be a happy person.
emails in the comments.
Oh, I like the flag.
No, but that's what I meant. Yes, that is an actual flame up there. That's kind of cool. They're still lit. There's a few houses we went past that still have them. And she likes the little crest, which probably means like, you know, slave hunters or something, but she likes it, so.
Yeah, I don't know the history behind it. I just think it's interesting. I think it's different.
This is fascinating. We're on our way to the Pineapple Fountain and found this. It's like a water park. The waterfront park. And you're allowed to go in the fountain. Fascinating. Pineapple Fountain, huh? Lacey says if you know, you know. Alright, so this is the park area where the Pineapple Fountain is located. Got some pretty cool buildings here. So there's the other side. And there's the Pineapple Fountain. And there's Macy. What'd you say about pineapples?
I like pineapples.
I don't know how well you can see it, but in the distance there's that aircraft carrier that we saw earlier in the video when we were passing the bridge. But there's like a sandbar with a cross on it out this way. And then here's the waterfront. It's a really nice waterfront.
It's kind of pretty. Makes me think of our days when we used to live on the coast. There's a sailboat like way back there.
Yeah, like a 3 sailboat, almost like a pirate ship-esque.
Yeah.
That's really cool. So I have a question for y'all. Is it like worshiping the plant, or like why are all the chairs just looking at a plant? Oh, savior of the plants. Please grow firm, please. And it looks like it's mostly dead too, sadly. Check out this old house. That's pretty cool. It's really small, but it's got some interesting flavor to it. That's pretty neat. Check out the water main. It's the water meter for Charleston. It has a little like palmetto tree on it with some cannons. That's cool. Wow, another really kind of interesting old building there. Look at the back of it. And then the front's a different like color.
He loves thick chicks.
And he loves thick chicks, everybody. Alright, so we're gonna go check out the building where they ratified the Constitution in South Carolina. This is also where they used to do the slave trade. So it's got some blood on its hands both ways, I guess. You have to let me know, what does South Carolina's most historic building mean? The oldest building? It doesn't make it most. The oldest change.
Not gone yet, John.
Oh, damn, I'm in.
Watch your arm. Don't make me get some
Don't
soap.
go down this way. Restoring the Old Exchange. Wooden arches. Wow, that supported many of the doors. That's fascinating. Wow, so this was a prison for those accused of treason during the American Revolution. And this is where they kept them, in the basement. That's why they call it the dungeon. Some good old-fashioned pilot flyers. Steve the Match. Good wall. There's what Charleston looked like back in the day. I know nothing. Little town, I know nothing. I mean, look at the cracks. We'll get that on camera here. But the ceiling is like super low in here. Let me show you what it looks like.
Alright, so here's Gary's head, like in relation to like
I can't even fully extend my arm.
Yeah, he's like literally right there. It's crazy.
Hello, everybody. My name is Noah. I'll be your tour guide today. And if you don't like my tour, my name is Seth. So I gotta start with some of the boring tour guide stuff. Alright, do I have everyone in here? Some threats from all over the place. So in order to defend ourselves, we built a wall around the city of Charleston. 3 sides of the city were on land, and we just built those walls out of some wood and some mud packed into it. And then we dug a moat around that portion.
There's the watch house. Apparently the river used to be just on the other side of that wall there, which is pretty cool. That's pretty fascinating. So apparently the biggest crop here was rice. Interesting. Another display. So apparently this house was built, well, this building was built so fast because of the slave labor. So. Okay, so here's where they signed and ratified. So this is the original double doors.
Back to what I was saying about the tea. During their entire time here, even though Colonel Moultrie built that wall without the iron grating, they built the wall to protect the gunpowder.
Okay, so that's where they hid 7 tons of gunpowder. That's a small space.
The high-profile people in such a terrible space. Another man that was sent off to St. Augustine was Christopher Gadsden, a very fiery patriot. However, rather than his fiery patriotism, he's more commonly known today for a flag that he designed. It's a yellow flag with a coiled rattlesnake that says, "Don't tread on me." And that rattlesnake has 13 rattles on its tail, because one rattle alone makes no sound, but 13 together can scare off a predator and warn it about the snake's striking. That represented the 13 colonies coming together to fight off the British. Now those mannequins in the far corner over there are going to represent some of those high-profile prisoners. But if you'll notice the woman in the very corner, she represents one of the 3 Saracen sisters. There were 3 sisters, and they had a brother named Jonathan. He's the man sitting down with a quill at that desk. Now, the British suspected Jonathan of being a spy. So what they did was take all 3 of the sisters, put them in this dungeon where they stayed for about a month, and Jonathan was just begging and pleading and petitioning to the British to let his sisters out. Eventually, he did admit that he was a spy, and the British did let the sisters out of the prison. Jonathan did not have a happy death. However, the sisters got out of town. They were told never to come back, and they all seemed a little crazy and emotional to everyone else at the time. We now recognize what they had as PTSD. One of the sisters actually had a mental breakdown after leaving. That gives you an idea of what kind of terrible conditions were down here. And I'll explain that in just a moment. So right here on this arch, during the British occupation, they built a makeshift wall out of barrels and sandbags and whatever they could find. There was a matching wall behind those mannequins where that white wall stands. So all it was these 3 squares here, from these double doors to a matching set over there. That was the entire dungeon. Now originally it was called a provost, which is a fancy word for a military prison. This place was built so that insubordinate British soldiers, people drinking on the job, acting up, could be sent down here for a timeout, not quite like tea time. However, eventually the British realized that their other prisons were overflowing a bit, so they started putting the patriots down here. And that kept accumulating. Eventually they held spies down here. Anyone they suspected of being a spy. Thieves, murderers. All kinds of people were held in this prison. And there was no discrimination down here. There wasn't a ladies section. And there were shared chamber pots. Not a fun time. Who knows how often they were emptied. Conditions down here were awful. They were only fed once a day. You'd get a piece of bread, maybe a piece of meat every few days, and a cup of water. And then when you went to sleep, you had to sleep on this rough, nasty brick. So eventually, the British guards guarding the doors decided, well, we'll give them something a little bit better to sleep on. So they brought in some straw. Well, hey, if you know anything about that, straw attracts rats and bugs, which bring diseases. So people down here were not only starving, but they were dying of yellow fever, typhus, all kinds of diseases. And because of these horrible, horrific conditions, this area gained its name as the Charlestown Dungeon, which is what is now known as today. Now, I really wish I could tell you that the Patriots came back and fought the British off, kicked them out of Charlestown. But realistically, after the surrender of the Battle of Yorktown, the British kind of just left Charleston, and that's when they left their tea behind. So a few of them were scattered around still, and that's what we use the tea for, to fight against. But most of them were gone by 1782. And the Revolutionary War officially ended in 1783. That was when the paperwork was done, because you can't end a war without your paperwork, I guess. The Treaty of Paris was signed in September of that year. And with the conclusion of the Revolutionary War, Charlestown, named originally after King Charles II, became Charleston. I don't see how different it is, though. It's still a beautiful city. And with that pretty much concludes your dungeon tour. Let me know if you guys have any questions, and feel free to follow me this way to the exit.
The bombardment. Bombardment. So they have a big display of the United States Constitution. Ratified here, May 23rd, 1788. All right, what did you think about the dungeon tour?
It was really interesting. Going down there was very informative. It wasn't super long. It was about 20 minutes. And I have to say, if you guys are going to be down here, definitely take a tour. There are 2 museums. If you come here, we came pretty late in the day, so we're not going to go to the other one, but we're going to take a look around here and see what else we can see.
So here's King George. This is what the town was originally named after. Wow, he looks like a putz. So this is fascinating. It talks about how they hired slaves and semi-freed them, but they were afraid that they would run away, so they had to carry these badges. Yeah, dog tags, badges, to make sure that they didn't run away.
And if they were caught without one, they were jailed or publicly whipped. That's terrible. That's absolutely terrible.
So interesting fact, this is known as Broad Street because it was the broadest street in Charlotte.
And it was 61 feet wide. It was also where the beef market was.
And during the Civil War, heavy shelling caused many of these buildings to collapse.
Yeah, and all of this is where all the wealthy people lived, was on this street. This is where all the luxury houses were as well. The estimated construction cost at that time was over $100,000.
Wow.
That's a lot of money.
Which makes sense why during the Revolutionary War and the Civil War they didn't really bomb this area because this is where the wealthy people were.
Yeah.
Class solidarity. Down there, that's the big church. And what did you say about it?
In colonial times, during the Civil War, they painted it black to make it more difficult for federal shells, and the bells were sent to Columbia for safekeeping. But the bells burned in the Great Fire of 1865, and during World War II, it served as an air raid station. And as a memorial to those who died, the clock was electrified in 1946. But when it was built, it was actually one of the nicest churches in the United States.
Something I find fascinating is this is the room basically they ratified the Constitution. Look how dark it is. There's only like 6 windows on each side. This would have been like a super dark room, other than during like high sun times. So something interesting is this is basically a call to arms and how much they paid people, but it's funny that it's spelled incorrectly, and yet because of how they had to make them, it wasn't worth it to reprint it. Fascinating. It kind of makes you wonder what Isaac Hayne did, because they sent all the wealthy basically to St. Augustine to live a life of luxury, but in quote-unquote prison. But this guy was a wealthy landowner and a successful businessman according to this, but they hung him, so maybe he wasn't that wealthy?
Because he had to take allegiance to the crown in order to obtain needed medicine. So I wonder what medicine that was too, you know?
Mm-hmm. All right, so what were you saying about this, Nacy?
I think he looks like Steve Carell. Like, is Steve Carell like a...
Time traveler?
I'll take a picture, so maybe the picture might turn out better.
You can see it on the camera. Fascinating that they have a 32-starred flag here. That's kind of interesting. It's not the 13 colonies, it's 32.
And it's from the Fort Sumter National Monument.
That's a little fort. So I was incorrect at the beginning of this. I thought this is where they did the slave trade as well. It's just built by slaves. The slave market is actually another building. Maybe we'll get there during our travel, so definitely subscribe. And we'll definitely be back here again. If we don't make it this time, we'll hit it again when we come back. So this is the original post office.
And it operated from 1888 to 1984.
Wow. 1984. That's crazy. That tiny of a place.
It's pretty cool. Kind of makes me think of when we went and did the railroad museum and they had the post office rail car.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
That's probably what they used at that time. Mm-hmm. Wow. Go check out that video in the top right-hand corner. Good connection there, Nancy. Those are pretty cool. There's actually one that we saw earlier on the water. It had 3 sails, not 2, but similar shape. All right, so here's the first African American, they call them, postmaster, and he's also a doctor.
Yep.
We get a good angle because it's a little glary.
And he came to South Carolina so he could be a doctor for African American Union recruits at Hilton Head, which is I think like 2 hours south of here.
So Hilton Head is an island off the coast.
Yes. So in 1850, the population of South Carolina was 43,345, and the most powerful and influential group in the antebellum South, which is South Carolina, Georgia, that area, were planters. And planters were anyone who was white and owned 10 or more slaves and a large amount of land.
There was 43,345 of them. There was 6.5% of the population. She incorrectly stated that. It's a little off, but...
Sorry. And then to be a planter was the highest level of a social achievement. Think Gone with the Wind.
Okay, I just think greedy landowner. Plain folks was 231,218, and that was about 35%. Mm-hmm. And they were mostly white.
Farmers who owned some land and maybe a few slaves. They were artisans and shopkeepers, but they usually owned no property. So they were probably the people who were like indentured white servitude.
No, they own land, so they were not in danger.
Well, it says
Thank
they
you.
own no property.
Farmers who own some land, and then there are people who didn't own anything. So
Oh,
basically
the
just,
plain folks. It's a little confusing how this is written.
yes, because they're trying to make it less racist. Now the slaves, there were 384,984 of them, which is almost 58% of the town, and they couldn't vote or anything. And then if you add to that the free blacks, which was about 9,000, which is 1.5%,
That's crazy.
that's a huge percentage of the population were black. They couldn't vote, they had no influence, and they couldn't do anything.
And then they also had the native people, who were the Catawba tribe.
Yes, which they don't have a count for.
There was only it says in 1854, only 54 remained in South Carolina, so they pushed them out.
Well, they didn't push them out, they slaughtered them.
That.
Cool model they have here, the Age of Sail. That actually looks like the one that was sailing, actually, from a distance. I wonder if it's the same boat, or the same style. Launched in 1903. Here's a shot of what the place looked like in 1780 before the river got pushed back. And then is what the exchange looked like in 1850. You can see it's more of like a street and pushed out for the boats. So it's interesting, the area that we just walked through, that park, that would be covered in buildings back then for ships to drop off their, I don't know, shipments? Some of the old weapons of war. Sword, revolver, musket. Check out that getup. That's a fancy getup. So here's some of the stuff from the slave train. They have a slave collar. There's that badge that we saw earlier and talked about. If I can block out the light enough, that's kind of what it looks like.
It's a free badge. This one's the slave.
Right, that's the free badge we talked about earlier. This one's not you if you're an actual slave. It's a reproduction too. It's not a real one. There's some shackles. We saw some cuffs upstairs too. And then there they are auctioning off people.
And so this says that in 1860, the 4 million American slaves were conservatively valued at $3 billion, which was almost 3 times the value of the entire American manufacturing establishment, or all the railroads in the United States, and about 7 times the net worth of all the banks, and some 48 times the expenditures of the federal government. That's insane.
So this is fascinating. They used to have a royal governor's chair, and this is a reproduction of it. This is what it looked like back in 1756. Can you imagine the arrogance to have your own chair? Don't sit here. This is my governor's chair. All right, what'd you think about the Old Exchange and Provost dungeon?
It was interesting. I would say if you guys are interested in coming here, definitely come earlier in the day, because like I said, there's actually 2 museums that are included in the price, and because we came so late in the day, we weren't able to go over to the other building and go tour that, but we're hoping maybe we can come back and tour that at a later date. But I enjoyed the tour. It was interesting. It wasn't quite as long as I thought it was going to be, but they did give us some interesting information, and mostly it focuses on the Revolutionary War and what they did in the Revolutionary War with this building. It's interesting they don't talk about what they did with this building during the Civil War, which I think was probably a lot worse than what they did during the Revolutionary War. But again, if you guys watch our video where we went to the museum of, was it the South Carolina State Museum? They definitely whitewash a lot of the history of South Carolina. Not really a fan of that part, or like just kind of skipping over it, but it is interesting. I think it's a part of our past, and I definitely think it's something that you should educate yourself on. So we're gonna go see what else we can check out down here in downtown Charleston, and stick around.
Rainbow Road. There's only a few houses. I'm actually surprised. I thought there would be more. It kind of goes down there. It's kind of painted colors too. All right, what did you think about this must-see attraction?
I mean, it's interesting. It's just a bunch of row houses. Actually, the row houses kind of make me think of Philly.
Yes.
And I'm sure they're built of that era and that type of architecture. So, and if you know anything about row houses, they're built vertically instead of like horizontally. So your rooms are usually pretty small and narrow, and then you have like these winding staircases that take you up to the top. And I'm not really a fan of row houses. So, but it's interesting. I think if you're down here and you want to see it, cool, but don't go out of your way.
Yeah, it's also blocked by a lot of trees. So just know that too ahead of time. The pictures always show it without trees. There are a lot of trees now.
Yeah.
Found some more of those gas lanterns. It's pretty cool.
I like them. I think they're really cool to know like that's like where the original gas pipelines and they're still there. I find them fascinating.
All right, we got a horse-drawn carriage. Let us know in the comments if you think we should take one next time. We're kind of tossed up whether we should or not. Look at the babies. So here's the beginning of the row houses again. There's not much to it. It's neat. Come down here and check it out, but not much to it. All right, so that concludes our trip to Charleston. We're back at our hotel. Check out that video in the upper right-hand corner. What did you think of our day?
It was fun. It was really hot, so we got really sweaty,
Yes,
but
that's really hot.
we got some lunch, which was okay. Then we went and found the pineapple fountain.
That was cool.
Saw the bay.
We saw the park that it's in, the John, I think it's John Memorial Park.
And it was really pretty with like all the canopy trees.
Yeah. Then we went to the dungeon, which was really kind of cool. We kind of got that historical perspective, a little bit whitewashed, but it was fun seeing that.
And then we went and found Rainbow Row with all the row houses that are like painted colorfully. Yeah, it was interesting.
Yeah, it's fascinating that everyone said we needed to see it, and it's just literally a row of houses. Like, it was neat.
If you're down there,
yeah, check it out, but
Don't go
I
out
wouldn't
of your
go
way.
out of your way. Yeah.
but yeah, so we're hoping to go back and check out the other half of the museum that we didn't get to see.
The slave market.
Hopefully we'll get to go back down there and then maybe do a ghost tour.
Yeah, we really want to do a ghost tour, so let us know in the comments if you've ever done one or what you think about those.
So if you guys like this video, make sure you give it a thumbs up.
Hit that subscribe button,
And make sure you ring that notification bell so that way you don't miss when we do at least 3 videos a week.
and we'll come and get you for the next one.
Ain't that the truth, baby Ruth?
Bye, everybody.
Bye.